Okay, so the last topic what we had to cover is about the enterprise analysis. Uh, Suppose that we could have a couple of sessions on the interview questions, and I could help you on those things. Today would be officially the last topic, the 7 knowledge areas what I have mentioned. So today is the last one what we have to cover. So once this is complete, I think we will spend some time on interview questions, and then maybe on some assignments or case studies kind of projects. Okay, so yeah, so today's session, let's focus on enterprise analysis. The first thing in this overall activities would be the enterprise analysis. Right? So before you even start a project or even you plan, right? So the first thing that would happen is the enterprise analysis. Now, basically, this involves identifying what all opportunities can you take up as an organization, and then create a business case document for this. Right? So all that would constitute your enterprise analysis, right? So now if you pick up any organization, right, now what project should it take up and why, right? So the justification is also important, right? So you cannot just spend like $2-3 million on a project just like that, right? So people would ask, on what basis have you taken up this project, right? So what is the justification for taking up the project? So obviously there needs to be some due diligence, some activities you should have taken up to identify what projects you should take up, right? So all those activities related to figuring out what kind of projects which you can take up, and then figuring out how much it would cost, what are the benefits you will get. All this analysis would be the first step as part of the project initiation, right? Even before the project gets initiated and the budget gets approved, all that would constitute enterprise analysis. So basically, it involves identifying new opportunities, right? So as an organization, what all projects can you take up, right? So should you develop a new mobile banking application, or should you revamp your existing CRM application, or you should rebuild your mainframe applications in new technology, right? So what is more important for you as an organization, right? So that's the first step that needs to be defined as part of enterprise analysis. They need to figure out what are the opportunities they should invest in, right? Then they would also need to figure out how does it fit into their overall business architecture. Now, business architecture is defined as the set of all documents, the collation of all documents will list down all the systems which are available in the system and how they are interrelated, right? So that interrelated set of documents which covers all the details about the systems, the people, processes, all that would constitute your business architecture. So how do these opportunities fit into this overall framework? And then what is the investments which you'll have to make to complete that project, right? How much would that project cost? What are the benefits that we'll get from that, right? Whether it's feasible or not, what do we need to make it happen? All those decisions would involve your enterprise analysis, right? Now you would not own all those activities, you'll contribute to this. So primarily there are some roles called as enterprise architects. So these are more like techno-functional people, right? So who understands both technology and business, and can take a decision regarding the overall view about your organization. What kind of system should you have? How should you organize your business and technical landscape? All those decision making would be under enterprise architect, right? So this could be one of the progression roles from a business analyst, right? So if you are further interested in that, overall IT strategy and architecture, you could get into this type of career progression, right? So again, like I said, it's not completely a business analyst role. You would contribute to this task at this level. You will help in identifying new opportunities and then build a business case for it, right? So you'll figure out whether it's feasible or not, right? So you won't own complete end-to-end activity, but contribute in some chunks and pieces of the work. And specifically, if you are hired as a business analyst by the client, right? So if you are in a vendor kind of situation, there is very little scope for you in involving these activities, right? So because if you are part of a vendor team, like let's say Capgemini or Accenture, right? So you'll get into the project only after you win the business, right? So all these activities are happening before the project is won, right? And so you have to be a business analyst at the client side itself to get involved in this. Okay, so how do you go about this step? How do you identify opportunities, right? So because the same opportunity could not be relevant for two different organizations, even though if they run in the same industry, right? Now let's take an example. Let's say there are two banks. So does that mean that whatever application you find relevant for one bank would be the same for other bank also? Might be, might not be. Like if it's a regulatory requirement, maybe all banks should definitely take it up, right? So there is no choice about it. But the IT budgets are influenced a lot by the business strategy of the companies, right? So let's say there are two different banks. One is focusing on the retail customers, like individuals, and it wants to grow their individual business. Another bank is focusing on corporates, like what are they give loans to companies and then finance their needs, right? So even though both of them are banks, their focus on target customers are different, right? So obviously they would want to invest in systems which will help grow their line of business, right? So maybe the retail banking type of banks would go for maybe a mobile banking application or a new CRM application, right? And then maybe the commercial banking type of banks would go for more like a system revamp and then process efficiency kind of systems, right? So the focus could be completely different. Even if there are two organizations in the same industry, their view of the same system would be different, right? So while one organization might take up a project, another organization might discard that because it doesn't find much use of it, right? So I'll give you some small example, right? So let's say there's one company which says that I want to be the biggest, I want to have the biggest market share. So I want to be the market leader by the share of the market size that I hold, right? So obviously, it wants the bigger market share, so it would go for acquiring more customers. It needs to spend more on sales system, so they need to reduce the sales cycle, right? So they need to convert the deals much faster, right? So obviously it has to invest in those sales systems, right? So they have to revamp their existing, the CRM systems, invest in new channels for the sales systems and the customers to reach out to, right? So it has to invest in those systems. And let's say there's another organization which wants to have the highest profitability, right? So it will basically invest in, to make the processes better, right? So can I make this task in like 1 day rather than the current 5 days, right? So what if I change my old mainframe systems to the new Java J2E systems, right? So will it give you more efficiency? Can I, rather than spending $100, can I do that in, let's say, $50? So those are the kind of efficiency projects the other organization is looking at. So obviously it will invest in those kind of projects, like process efficiencies or replacing older system with newer ones, trying to do some process engineering. So all that would be done as part of your uh, the second organization's priorities, right? So even though the two organizations are in the same industry, their needs would be different, right? So where do you start? You would basically start by aligning your IT strategy towards your strategic business goals, right? So like I said, if your business is, if your strategic goal is to be the number one market leader, you will invest in all those sales systems, the new channel systems, the customer relationship systems. So that would be your focus area, right? If your more, if your strategy is to be the most profitable organization in that industry, you'll invest in making your systems more efficient, right? You'll work on cutting your cost rather than increasing revenues, right? So that way, you would their focus would be different, right? So if you are trying to identify opportunities, make sure that they are aligned to your strategic goals. Okay, so that's when the first step. Figure out the opportunities which will help you uh, in meeting your strategic goals. Right? Then you would figure out, okay, what all programs can I take up to meet this strategic goal from an IT point of view. Right? So you keep collecting that information, then you'll start preparing a business case for those documents, and then you'll keep doing that until you get to a stage where you have enough information to take a decision, right? So you will consolidate all of that and then take it to the senior management as a business case document with a go no go decision. So the senior management would look at your argument, they would look at the business case document, and finally approve or reject the project. Right? If it is approved, then your project planning would start, and then that is where you are, you would move on to the next steps. Okay, so so let's look at the process in a little more detail and also focus onto the business case document, what basically it constitutes of. Right? So overall, the next level of activities in an enterprise analysis would be these 6 steps. First step is basically creating or maintaining the business architecture. So overall, if you pick up any organization that would have multiple applications in its, supporting its business, right? So how would you organize and present that view of the various systems and how they are interconnected between people, processes, and systems? All that would constitute your business architecture. Now there are some frameworks like TOGAF is one, then you have Zachman framework, and Poldat is another one, right? So these frameworks help you maintain that. We don't really need to worry about that. That's not our job. Like I said, it's more like a career progression role. As an enterprise architect, you would be getting into all those activities of defining your architecture and all. Then you would figure out those opportunities coming out of those, based on your strategic goals, and then you would conduct the feasibility studies. So let's say you identified, okay, we should implement a new mobile banking app if we want to retain more customers, right? Now, what all details, what all features should be there in that mobile banking app? How many of them are feasible? Can we actually take up this mobile banking app or not, right? Would it be successful, right? What all features should be there in that scope of the system, right? How much would it cost? What is the benefit that you're going to get? All those details are covered as part of your feasibility studies and figuring out your project scope. Then finally, you'll depict all that into a business case document, and then say, what, we need to implement $2 million for this project, and it will have these 20-30 features, and it will take us 6 months to complete this project. After that, for the next 4 years, we'll be getting like $1 million every year. So overall, it has a return on investment of X percentage. right? So that is exactly what you do as part of your business case document. Then finally, you would you would figure out those risks involved in it, and finally prepare the decision package and present it to your senior folks in the organization. So once that business case is approved, that's where it moves on to the next phase of the project, which is the project plan. Okay, so we can ignore this part of creating and maintaining the business architecture, right? So I mean, at this point in time, I wouldn't suggest you go through this. Even for your interviews and all, they will not ask about it. What you might be interested in is a business case document. So let's look at a template for the business case. So when you are collecting all that information and then figuring out the feasibility and all, how would you generally take up a business case document is covered in this. So ideally, you'll give an introduction. What is the purpose of this business case document, right? And what is it which is triggering this business case, right? So if you are, let's say you are creating a business case document for a mobile banking app, right? So you'll say, the purpose of this document is to create a business case for your mobile banking app. You'll capture the project information. You'll also capture the business drivers of the project, right? So what is the business need, right? So what are the goals that you're trying to achieve, right? So all those are clearly defined, right? So because unless there is a business need, it's aligned to your strategic goals, you should generally not take up any project, right? So you are clearly calling out the business goals or the needs which are driving this project, and then what is it that you try to achieve through this project, also you'll capture that, right? Then you'll figure out your risk in issues which are there and a mitigation plan as well, right? Overall, then the high level business impact it's going to make, and then you'll figure out to achieve that need, what are all the various alternatives, right? So maybe you could buy a new mobile banking from a vendor, or you could develop it in house, right? Again, the solution could be like a native app, which is iOS app or Android app separately, or it could be a hybrid app which is available on the web, right? So there are multiple ways in which you could have developed it. So you look at all those alternatives, like buying, you're building it yourself or buying it from a vendor, right? Whether you should outsource it or should be in house, right? Is it a commercially available product, or you're custom building it, right? So the technologies and all those alternatives will be looked at, right? So depending on the choices available, you'll figure out, okay, now for each of the alternatives, you'll figure out what is the cost, and then what is the benefit you would derive from that particular system, right? All that you would figure out, and then calculate something called as an internal rate of return, right? Or net present value, right? So these are the two things which will basically tell you what is the success of the project, right? So basically what we are saying is we are spending $1 million in the first year, right? And another $900,000 in year one, and $50,000 in year two. So total there is an investment of $2 million. And for the next, in year four, you are getting a benefit of 550 and $1.15 million, right? So and year five, you are getting a 1.25, right? So overall, in year four, there is a benefit of 1.7 million and 1.25. Right? Overall, you're getting around 3 million or so. So if you take the net present value, which comes over to 500K or 498K, right? So this is positive, and internal rate of return is like it's giving you a return of 12%, and total return on investment is 180%. So if you have invested $100, you are getting $180 in this, right? So you'll do that all that financial modeling to figure out your basic cost, investments, and then the return coming out of it for each alternative, and then you'll provide your recommendations, right? So as a preferred solution, I would look at these various considerations And then this is my recommendation. That's what you would do as part of your business case document, right? So it's a little complicated thing, right? So you won't generally get involved in the business case document at the start of it. Like I said, unless you are there as a business analyst at the client location, you will not get involved in this. Okay, and a lot of your time would be helping out the enterprise architect. You will be working under an enterprise architect on these activities, so you'll not own it completely end to end. So maybe you'll be given like piecemeal task, like go and figure out if there are any product vendors for this particular requirement. Like let's say I want a uh, mobile banking solution. You'd be given task like go figure out what are all the uh, mobile banking product vendors. So you can just search for mobile banking products, right? So there's one from Gemalto, then you have Pony, then they have a, I think they're more like, right? Then there's one from Pfizer, right? So you can figure out all those product vendors and then prepare that list. Then you could do a cost benefit, you could do a comparison analysis, competitor analysis for all of them, right? And then you will figure out your um, you'll figure out which one is more tuned to you, and then you will take that out as a and then decide onto that, right? So you could contribute onto some of these tasks, but you will not own end to end. So that's the point what I wanted to make, right? So you'll be given this smaller task, like figure out those vendors, or uh, figure out whether you should build it in house, or you should buy it, right? So you'll have to do some secondary research. You have to figure out, talk to people, and then understand the context, right? And so there's no hard and fast rule. It's more like a consulting kind of activity, right? So it's difficult to teach you that this is exactly the step you should take up there, right? So that's where your analytical and consulting skills come into place, right? And like I said, this is more like a progressive role for you. At the starting phase of your career, you won't generally get involved into these activities. Okay, so that's primarily what you would be doing as part of enterprise analysis, right? Now, I do understand that it's a lot vague for you guys at this point in time, but again, don't expect any interview questions on this. So the only question that I could see is from this topic is, you could be asked, okay, have you worked on any business case document? Say yes, talk about that these are the high level activities that I do as part of this business case, and that's the kind of response that you should have, right? I worked on feasibility analysis of some projects, then figuring out those alternate solutions, right? So those are kind of things that you could say about, right? So don't talk about any business architecture and all those questions would not come in. So broad question could be on, did you work on any business case, right? So then we went through the format of a business case. Basically, you'll find out the context, then you'll identify the business need of which is uh, for which you want to create this system for. You'll identify those alternatives and also do some financial modeling if possible to find out which ones to recommend, right? So this is what you would do as part of your enterprise analysis. So like I said, again, for all practical purposes, ignore this topic for your interview preparation. Most of your interviews would be focused on these elicitation techniques, right? So you'll have to focus on how are you going to engage the customer and understand the requirements, and then how you are going to document them, right? A lot of the projects where you would work on would be mostly change request. So how you should be very clear about how to handle a change request, how to capture the details into a change request, right? And if it's a new project, you should be able to clearly document your requirements using use cases if it's done in a waterfall or a traditional SDLC model, or using user story if it's done in an agile model, right? So that's broadly would be the focus. Then you would be expected to manage the scope, the traceability, the change management process, all that would be covered as part of your planning phase. So broadly, part 2, 3, and 4 are more important for you, right? So focus on those topics accordingly for your interviews.